Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Hezbollah fires back after days of Israeli strikes. So Israel has launched dozens of strikes in Lebanon since a ceasefire was supposed to go into effect last week. And on Monday, Hezbollah fired back for the first time, launching 2 rockets toward Israeli-occupied territory as a warning shot. And this rocket fire caused no casualties. But in response, Israel basically said they were going to escalate the situation. Netanyahu said in a statement, quote, Hezbollah's firing at Mount Dove constitutes a serious violation of the ceasefire, and Israel will respond forcefully. We are determined to continue enforcing the ceasefire and to respond to any violation by Hezbollah. A minor one will be treated like a major one, end quote. So shortly after Netanyahu's threat, Israel carried out a series of airstrikes on areas of South Lebanon, killing at least 5 people. So, again, Monday is the first time Hezbollah fired toward Israel, toward Israeli troops. A source with the UN's peacekeeping force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, told CNN that Israel has violated the ceasefire agreement approximately 100 times since it went into effect last Wednesday. The Lebanese government said that Israel has violated it over 50 times. And these Israeli violations have involved gunfire, artillery shelling, and airstrikes. According to Al Jazeera, Israeli strikes since last Wednesday have killed 11 people. And Hezbollah said that the rockets it fired on Monday were defensive warning shots in response to Israel killing and wounding civilians. So as of the time I'm recording this, late Monday night here in the U.S., I haven't seen if there's been any Hezbollah response to the latest Israeli strikes, the ones that killed 5 people. But you see what a mess this is. I mean, this ceasefire agreement, Israel is they've been claiming that Hezbollah is violating the agreement. That's how they're justifying all these strikes. The claim is that Hezbollah's presence, this is what Israel's foreign minister said, that Hezbollah's presence in South Lebanon is a violation. But under the ceasefire deal, both sides have 60 days to withdraw. Israel has to bring its troops out of southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah has to bring its troops and military equipment north of the Litani River. But they have 60 days to do it. So this claim that they're violating the ceasefire just by being there is not true. And according to CNN, both the U.S. and France have warned Israel that they believe the Israeli military has violated the ceasefire agreement. So the U.S. and France are saying that behind the scenes. Of course, they're not. The U.S. isn't going to blame Israel for anything publicly. And there was a report from Axios that said the U.S. has told Israel the ceasefire deal may unravel. So the U.S., of course, shares some of the blame for these Israeli violations, since the U.S. gave Israel a letter of assurance saying that Israel could launch unilateral strikes on Hezbollah on southern Lebanon if it deemed the ceasefire was being violated. So they basically gave Israel this freedom of action that they wanted. And this assurance letter was outside of the deal. It was not part of what Lebanon signed with Israel. The U.S. tries to act like it's some sort of neutral mediator in this, but of course they're Israel's biggest backer, and they gave them a guarantee that they would still let them bomb Lebanon, and this is the result. It's not a surprise. So there's a chance here that things could really ramp back up again in Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. will not cry about the HTS offensive in Syria. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said on Sunday that the U.S. will not cry over the pressure the Syrian government and its allies are facing from an offensive on Aleppo led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which is an offshoot of al-Qaeda. Sullivan acknowledged that HTS was a terrorist organization designated by the United States. He said that the U.S. has real concerns about the designs and objectives of HTS. But he added, quote, "At the same time, of course, we don't cry about the fact that the Assad government, backed by Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, are facing certain kinds of pressure," end quote. So the U.S. is not crying about the fact that this al-Qaeda-linked group has taken over Aleppo. And HTS, it looks like they've taken over the whole city. This comes following the surprise offensive that was launched last Wednesday. And this did come after Israel stepped up airstrikes on Syria, as they saw their moment to go for the territory. And so, what Sullivan is saying, I mean, this has long been kind of the U.S. policy. And U.S. officials have not been shy in the past about their preference for HTS and its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, over other factions in Syria. And al-Julani was the founder of the al-Nusra Front, which was al-Qaeda in Syria. Now he leads HTS. So James Jeffrey, who's an American diplomat who served as a special envoy to Syria under the Trump administration from 2018 to 2020, said in a 2021 interview that HTS was an asset to the U.S.'s strategy in Idlib. Idlib is a province, a governorate in northwest Syria that HTS has controlled since 2017. So this is Jeffrey again in 2021. And again, this is a U.S. official who worked on Syria. This was his portfolio. He said, quote, "They are the least bad option of the various options on Idlib, and Idlib is one of the most important places in Syria, which is one of the most important places right now in the Middle East," end quote. So this is a big interview he did with Frontline, PBS Frontline. They did this big interview with Julani. They interviewed Jeffrey as part of it. And Julani was, as I mentioned, formerly the leader of al-Nusra Front. In 2016, he publicly announced that he was splitting with al-Qaeda and changed his group's name to Jabhat Fatah al-Sham. And then that merged with other Islamist groups to form HTS in 2017. Really, ideologically, still the same. Essentially, he went through this rebranding campaign as part of an effort to gain more support from the West. And Jeffrey, in this interview, said that while he was in this role in the U.S. government as this special representative for Syria, he was in regular contact with Julani and HTS. He said that a typical message from Julani went something like this. I'll just read his quote. So he's saying this is one of the messages he would get from Julani. Quote, "This is what we're doing. These are our goals. We're not a threat to you," end quote. And Jeffrey said that he responded to Julani by saying, quote, "I couldn't agree more. Keep me informed as often as possible," end quote. So it's really something, the interview. I linked to the transcript. You could look through it. It's just really something. So al-Qaeda and other extremist groups made up a significant portion of the opposition to Assad when the war broke out in 2011. I linked to a document from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency that says al-Qaeda and other Salafist groups were the driving force behind the insurgency. And that's the U.S. saying that in 2012. And then, of course, I had to mention, Jake Sullivan sent a very infamous email to Hillary Clinton about Syria in 2012 when he worked as an aide. He was like a policy advisor to Hillary Clinton. He told her in an email that was released by WikiLeaks that AQ is on our side in Syria. And that remains to be the case today. And, there's a big rehabilitation campaign for Julani in Western media. People will say, he fights against al-Qaeda, he fights against ISIS, but he actually, was allied with al-Baghdadi and ISIS back in the day. They started fighting in 2013. And then HTS has been fighting against Haras al-Din, which is the other militant faction that they still openly, declare their allegiance to al-Qaeda. So you'll hear a lot of that. But I mean, this is who this guy is, and this is who the U.S. is saying that they're not crying about these guys, these Al-Qaeda guys, taking over Syria's second largest city and restarting this war. And, if you ask an American, who's your enemy, who's more so your enemy, the Syrian government, Iran or Hezbollah or Al-Qaeda, I think people would probably pick Al-Qaeda. All right, so the next one here, a report says that Syrian Islamists court Israel with talk of peace deal. So this is one from Jason Ditz. Former Israeli military intelligence officer Lieutenant Mordecai Ketar has added fuel to the claims that Israel has ties with the Syrian Islamist fighters who have taken the city of Aleppo and surrounding area in the past week. Lieutenant Ketar says that he is in constant contact with these groups and that they do not consider Israel an enemy. So the talk of Israeli complicity with the Islamist offensive began virtually when the offensive started, attracting attention. On Saturday, the Syrian army issued a statement that's saying that they are effectively fighting the military arm of Israel. And again, this came after all these Israeli strikes in Syria. Israel fighting against Hezbollah, which is an ally of Syria. They have a presence in Syria, and I believe they withdrew a lot of fighters to focus on fighting Israel. So, and this is a former Israeli intelligence official saying that what he's calling Syrian revolutionaries must be supported. They have a common interest in regime change. And he's saying that they told him that they're ready for a peace deal with Israel after they take over all of Syria and Lebanon. So apparently they have their eyes on Lebanon, and they also want to open Israeli embassies in both Damascus and Beirut. So how far this contact goes is not exactly clear, but Lieutenant Ketar did say that he recently passed a detailed list of requested items from the Islamist forces to the Israeli government. He did not say what items were requested, and that is not unprecedented. Former Israeli Army Chief Gabi Eisenkot acknowledged in 2019 that Israel had supplied weapons to the opposition, to the Syrian groups, which included the Nusra Front during the war in Syria. So, again, not unprecedented here, but it's just really something that this guy's saying, we're in constant contact with them. They don't consider Israel an enemy. They wanted to give us an embassy in Damascus. It's just really something here. All right, so the next story, Trump issues threat if Hamas won't free hostages. So President-elect Donald Trump warned in a post on Truth Social on Monday that there would be all hell to pay if Hamas does not release the remaining Israeli hostages before his inauguration. He wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity," end quote. So a hostage and ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas appeared to be close earlier this year, but Netanyahu worked to sabotage it, and this is a fact that's been acknowledged by plenty of Israeli officials, plenty of Israeli media outlets. This is just known that Netanyahu has been the major obstacle to a hostage deal. But anyway, Trump added in his post, quote, "Those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. Release the hostages now," end quote. So it sounds like he's threatening them with some sort of American strike here. And this threat came after Hamas. They just released a video of Adon Alexander, who's an Israeli-American IDF soldier who was taken hostage during the October 7th attack. And then on Monday, Israel confirmed the death of Omer Maxim Nutra. He's a New York-born IDF tank commander. Apparently, he was killed during the October 7th attack. He was in a tank on the Gaza border, and he was killed, and his body was brought back into Gaza. They just confirmed that he was killed. And then just to have some other details here about the situation with the hostages. Hamas is saying that a total of 33 Israeli hostages had been killed in Gaza due to Israel's bombardment and siege. and others have gone missing. There are believed to be 97 Israeli hostages remaining in Gaza, and Israeli media reported back in September that Netanyahu believes only half of them are actually alive. And there's been other reporting saying that he's decided that the Israeli government has given up, is not pursuing ceasefire and hostage talks, and that they're focusing on annexing portions of Gaza, which I think is pretty clear from their actions and what's happening on the ground. All right, so the next one here, another Trump-related story. This is kind of freaky, this story. A Zionist group hopes that Trump will deport pro-Palestine protesters. So the American branch of the global Betar Zionist movement, that's a globe. They were initially founded by, what's his name? Zhabitinsky, back in the 1920s. One of the early influential Zionists founded this group. And there's a U.S. branch of it. They just kind of restarted it. And they're using facial recognition technology with artificial intelligence to identify foreign students who have attended pro-Palestine protests in hopes that President-elect Donald Trump will deport them when he comes into office. So this is Ross Glick. He is the head of Betar's U.S. branch. He said that foreign students on visas in the U.S. should not have the right to free speech if they're criticizing Israel. This is essentially what he said. He told the Times of Israel, quote, "Even many of the protesters engaging in peaceful activities are part of a front for groups that are trying to undermine America and Israel. We believe in freedom of speech, but if a foreign student is here on a visa, they don't have the same rights as others to protest or promote anti-Zionist narratives," end quote. So he's saying if you're a foreigner on a visa going to an American college, you don't have the right to criticize, to spread anti-Zionist narratives. So Glick said Betar has identified dozens of students from Canada, the UK, and several Arab countries that will be reported to the Trump administration. The process involves identifying people through video footage and then looking into them online. Again, this is very freaky stuff here, spooky stuff here, using facial technology and AI to identify people and then looking into their background and seeing if you should try to get them deported, all because they're critical of Israel. I mean, just imagine this was some other foreign country and there's a group trying to do this on their behalf. I mean, it would be a big deal. And Trump did say at one of his rallies that he would deport foreigners for protesting against Israel. He said, quote, "If you come here from another country and try to bring jihadism or anti-Americanism or anti-Semitism to our campuses, we will immediately deport you. You'll be out of that school," end quote. So this guy Glick says that his organization has been working with members of Congress, including Senators Ted Cruz and John Fetterman, to ensure that protesters are rounded up as soon as Trump comes into office. So again, this is something I'm worried about with the Republicans in charge of the House and the Senate. They've been passing all this crazy legislation trying to crack down on speech that's critical of Israel, and Trump has been, threatening to do things like this. It's not going to be good. I think they're really going to try to push a lot of these anti-Semitism laws through and things like that. All right, so the next one here, Israeli attacks kill 37 in Gaza in 24 hours. So Gaza's health ministry said Monday that at least 37 Palestinians were killed and another 108 were wounded in the previous 24-hour period as Israeli attacks continued across the Strip. The ministry counts the dead by the number of bodies that arrive at hospitals and morgues, but many bodies cannot be reached, especially in northern Gaza, which has been under siege as part of this ethnic cleansing campaign since early October. So Israeli attacks on Monday included an attack on a house in the northern city of Jabalia. According to Wafa, at least 7 Palestinians were killed in the strike and others were wounded. Israeli strikes also pounded Beit Lahia in the north, hitting a house. The casualties are unclear as rescuers were unable to reach the site of the strikes to recover bodies. Israeli strikes also hit southern and central Gaza. At least 2 were killed in an attack on displaced Palestinians in Rafah, and at least 1 was killed in an Israeli strike on a village in central Gaza. So the daily slaughter, the daily violence in Gaza continues. All right, the next one here. Company specializing in West Bank Outposts is at work in Gaza. So this article is from Dropsite News from Yunus Tir Awi, and he's a Palestinian journalist who really closely follows the social media activity of Israeli troops and digs up some really important stuff here. And so this is there is a construction company called the Israeli Libby Construction Company that builds settlements, builds outposts in the West Bank. And they have bulldozers, they have crews inside Gaza, inside northern Gaza, in these cities, Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, Jabalia, where they are conducting these extensive demolitions. And again, I mean, this goes to show the direction that this is going. A company that works on settlement construction is doing the demolitions. So what's the logical next step? There's a lot of details in here in the story. I would recommend you all go scroll through it. But he said he found a job posting and he like followed up on it, and you can get a job for like $165 a day driving a bulldozer for this company and demolishing buildings in Gaza. And so, you know, I try to cover it a lot. All these signs that settlements are coming, all these settler leaders saying that they're ready to go in. And this is another sign that this could happen, I think, really soon, especially with the Trump administration coming in, him putting a guy like Huckabee as the ambassador to Israel. You know, if Israel starts doing this, he's not going to say anything against it. And, you know, they might just start doing this in January, you know, in the final weeks of the Biden administration. You know, initially the government might not be the one that does it, but they're going to have, you know, members of the government are going to support it if settlers, you know, working with soldiers, if settlers enter Gaza and start building things, start putting up camps and then building structures, they're not going to kick them out. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens very soon. All right, so the next one here, a new $725 million arms package for Ukraine. So the Biden administration announced on Monday a new $725 million weapons package for Ukraine. And this includes the anti-personnel mines that Biden recently lifted restrictions on them to send them to Ukraine, which is a very controversial move. Anti-personnel mines, they're small mines designed to kill or maim people, designed to blow people's legs off, very indiscriminate. They're left behind. They riddle the landscape. And, you know, lots of civilian casualties as a result of these anti-personnel mines. And what's really, the really incredible thing about it is that, you know, U.S. officials are saying Ukraine's going to use them in Kursk. They're going to use them inside Russia. So it's the U.S. is providing these mines for use actually inside Russian territory. And to do that, Biden had to violate his own policy, go around it, that he enacted, that prohibits the use and transfer of all American anti-personnel mines everywhere except for the Korean Peninsula. I guess they keep them laid there. And there's other things included in this package, including ammunition for the HIMARS rocket systems. That could mean more ATACMS are being sent over there. Those are the longer range missiles that Biden also recently authorized Ukraine to use. You know, there's been all these big escalations lately. And they're trying to rush as many weapons as they can over there as possible. Other things that were included, Stinger Stinger's anti-aircraft missiles, counter-drone systems, artillery ammunition, the landmines, tow missiles, Javelin anti-tank systems, small arms and ammunition, and other things like that. So trying to just dump as many weapons into Ukraine as they can. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. military says that it intercepted a Houthi attack. On Sunday, U.S. Central Command said that U.S. Navy destroyers intercepted missiles and drones launched by Yemen's Houthis at 3 U.S. commercial vessels in the Gulf of Aden. So the CENTCOM said that the U.S. Navy destroyers defeated this attack. That's how they described it. The Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, took credit for the attack, saying they targeted 3 U.S. supply ships and 1 U.S. destroyer. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Sarria said Yemeni workers carried out precise hits on the U.S. ships, but CENTCOM is saying that there was no damage or injuries. They said the destroyers, quote, successfully engaged and defeated 3 anti-ship ballistic missiles, 3 one-way attack uncrewed aerial systems, and 1 anti-ship cruise missile, end quote. So this is just another example. This U.S. bombing campaign in Yemen has not deterred Houthi attacks. The U.S. started this campaign back in January, so it's been almost a year. And look what's still happening. And, the bombing only escalated the situation. After that, the Houthis started attacking U.S. commercial shipping. They weren't doing that before then. The U.S. intervened to start bombing Yemen in defense of Israeli shipping. So this is, and again, almost a year later, and what does the U.S. have to show for it? A lot of money spent on intercepting these drones and missiles and bombing Yemen. All right, so the last story here, Israel bans Islamic call to prayer. This article is from Middle East Eye. So Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir directed police on Sunday to ban mosques from playing the Adhan, or Islamic call to prayer, claiming that it disturbs Jewish residents. He has instructed authorities to confiscate loudspeakers and fine mosques for playing the call, which lasts about 2 minutes. Ben-Gvir defended the move as necessary to combat unreasonable noise and lawlessness. In an interview with Channel 12, Ben-Gvir said that he was proud to move forward with a policy of stopping unreasonable noise from mosques. He said, quote, in our debates, it arose that most Western countries and even some Arab countries limit the noise and have many laws on the matter. It's only neglected in Israel, end quote. In a post on X, he called the call to prayer a hazard to nearby Israelis. Palestinian citizens of Israel, however, view the ban as a provocative attack on their community and religious rights. Ahmad Tibi, an MP and leader of the Tal Party, condemned the decision. He said, quote, Ben-Gvir wants to set the area on fire on religious grounds. In the past, there were attempts to pass a law against calls to prayer in mixed cities. Our position on this issue in the Arab sector is to oppose police entry. The Adhan will continue because Islam will continue, end quote. He then accused Netanyahu of being behind Ben-Gvir's actions, saying, quote, he is the head and he is responsible for this thing and the difficult consequences that could occur if this thing comes true, end quote. Human rights advocates and Palestinian mayors have denounced the ban as another discriminatory move by Israel's government. So Ben-Gvir really kind of stoking the religious tensions as he does. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Joseph D. Terwilliger. No, Kim Jong-un did not close the door to diplomacy with the U.S. One from Ron Paul. Biden's parting shot at America. One from Gideon Levy. After a year of silence, a voice from the dead. A call from an old friend in Gaza. One from Mohammed Sahimi. Maximum pressure 2.0 on Iran could trigger a nuclear crisis. And our spotlight is from Kelly Vlahos at the American Conservative. Doge's best first target, the National Endowment for Democracy. And I think that's absolutely right. This agency, or whatever it's called, that Elon Musk is going to be running to cut government spending and waste. She's saying, and this is what I thought of immediately when they were, one of them, Vivek or Elon, said something about cutting funding to NGOs. And immediately the National Endowment for Democracy popped in my mind, because this is essentially a CIA cutout that funds these kind of civil society groups in all these other countries. And, just you imagine if the shoe was on the other foot, foments unrest in these other countries. It's a real arm of the U.S. empire, of U.S. intervention. And it should go. I mean, Victoria Nuland went right back over there after leaving the Biden administration. So that gives you an idea of what kind of organization it is. So go check that out. That's it for me for today. You could always support this show by sharing, like, subscribe, tell your friends about antiwar.com. Follow us on social media, on Instagram, on X. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.